My name is Stephanie and this is Wilder Than the Wind Studio, and today we are going to do a landscape, abstract landscape kind of picture that is done intuitively and without any implements at all. We're just using the inks themselves, some blending solution, and the nozzles that are on the inks will be our part of what we use to paint with, and we'll also be using some tilting of the tile to help us with painting. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm putting on some blending solution. You want quite a bit. You see that my tile was a little bit with the inks on them, and I like that so that you guys can see exactly how much blending solution I have on here, and it's quite a bit. So we want to make sure that our substrate is quite wet, but not just soaking, okay? So it's a bit of a delicate balance. Sometimes it takes a few tries. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna lay down our colors. So number 1, wild plum. Number 2, we'll go with flamingo. And number 3, that's the one that is kind of not doing the right thing, so I don't wanna use the sunset orange. I'll grab Valencia instead. My sunset orange is acting up, so we are going to use Valencia instead, and some honeycomb, and maybe even a little bit of butterscotch in there. So that's gonna be pretty, I think. And we're gonna take a little bit of Blanco Blanco and put it into the wild plum, because that Blanco Blanco is pretty dark. So then we're just gonna take it and we're gonna tip it this way, and then we're gonna bring it this way. Might erect my sky again, we'll see. That's orange has something in it, and I don't know what it is. And we just tilt 2 to 3 times. Sometimes it only even takes 1 time. It depends on how much blending solution you have and how much color you have and how much you want to blend it together. So let's try to go over that part that is acting up. Okay, so now the bottom of my tile is very wet. So I'm gonna have to go on here and just give it a wipe to get some of that off, because otherwise as it dries, it's going to crawl back onto my painting. So I want to mitigate that by wiping it off. And you can see I'm getting kind of one of those clear kind of sunset prairie skies that are really popular around here because we live on the prairies. Okay, so we're gonna leave that as is, but we want to make sure this is dry before we flatten this out. If I was to flatten this out too soon, my inks crawl back on me. So I want to make sure that this is dry before I tip it down flat. And this is looking like it's pretty dry now. So I'm going to leave it. And there's our sky. Okay, so then we're going to do some, geez, this almost looks very prairies with the bottom like that. So what am I gonna do with that? Well, I think what I'll do is, there's something with my sunset orange that's happening there. I had put it there and it does some weird wild things. So that's okay, I'm gonna leave that little spot in there, but that usually doesn't happen with your inks. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use a mixative. So I have a gunmetal here, and this is also by Tim Holtz Ranger. So this mixative, I'm going to just bring down in here. So we're gonna use the nozzle and paint this little hill, okay? So we'll stick some gunmetal, and I'll also stick some slate in here, okay? So the slate is obviously much thinner than the gunmetal. So we have a lot of cool, interesting things happening there when we create like a little hill. I'm also going to add a little bit of gold in here for something different, and this is pinata gold. So you can see how much that reacts with it. and create some really cool lines in the hill. And some blending solution to finish things off for this hill. Hopefully that'll be enough. If not, we can do some other stuff. Let's see, maybe I'll put this down about like that. So we're using those nozzles, and those are what's going to help us paint the picture that we want. I'm keeping it angled this way so that my hill is on a bit of an angle. You don't really want your hill to be flat down. And because the blending solution's still in there, I can even add a little bit of color in there, some rocks, whatever. So there's one little rolling hill to our abstract landscape. And then I might mix it up a bit and add some of this honeycomb this way. So my honeycomb's gonna go over here. And then I'm gonna angle it towards myself a bit. So this honeycomb's gonna go that way. Oops. And I can even use my finger to get in there and move that around a little bit. And I have honeycomb. Now I'm going to add a little bit of wild plum in there and a little bit of mixative, so some gunmetal as well. So you can see that I'm creating kind of a opposing force here. And then some blending solution in here too. All right, that's looking okay. We can still put a little bit more stuff in there. And I want some gold as well. The gold really helps break it up. But our hills are going to have different colors in them, but they're going to have the colors of the sky. Because although this hill has mostly slate in it, this one has some plum and some honeycomb in it. So there's a couple of hills there. And that's pretty basic stuff. We're not reinventing the wheel on that one either. So I could even throw in a little bit more blending solution and start adding to this hill and kind of making some interesting things happen, because blending solution is just so much fun. So I'm gonna move it over there, and I have mermaid is always nice with the pink, so I have some mermaid up there. This crawling is happening, but this is an abstract landscape, so I really don't care. I could even angle this down a little bit and bring that hill down again if it's a little bit too much blending solution. So there's some interesting kind of blooms on the hill. Let's see, how about some slate? So really this is a lot of playing, and you're really just watching me play. I guess maybe for some of you that's fun, some of you might be not as impressed with it, and that's okay. What we want to do is just get this hill to where, get it to a point where we really like what's happening. I have some pink and blue over there. I might add a little bit of pink over here too. And some honeycomb in there. Okay, so we're just making some colors and having some fun. I'm not following a color swatch chart or anything else. I'm just really having a good time. And I think that that's kind of the spice to things, is you really do want to have a good time. So this is starting to look pretty cool. It has some interesting shapes in it, and organic things really happening over here. I have a hair there, so I'm gonna pull that out because it's still wet. When it's still wet, you can pull the hair out. If it's not wet, see, when I touch that, not so good. That's okay though. We're going to add to this anyways. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the blue and work it around the blue that I already have, and throw in a little bit of Blanco Blanco in there. Love me some Blanco Blanco. And the blue with the orange hill is really interesting as well. We can throw in, let's see what else is happening here. I'm kind of liking the hill, how it's growing here and how this blue is here. So I'm gonna add even more blue. I can add some more, I had the gunmetal, so I think I might throw some silver in here, see what happens. Yeah, the Ranger doesn't bloom as much as the other stuff does, but you can still move it around a little bit and push it through there. Looks pretty neat. And what other color? I think I had some coral in my sky, so I'm gonna throw some coral over here. And you can see this is just intuitive painting. We're just having a really fun time, just moving things around and creating abstract landscapes, which are very, very simple and really fun. And what you're doing is you're just moving things around until you see something that you like happening in there. So I'm adding some Blanco Blanco on the bottom, just to give it a little, and maybe because maybe there's grass in the front, so I have some butterscotch. I don't even have a green in my repertoire right now, so I'll throw some butterscotch in there, then a little bit of mermaid. Once again, this is just breaking up some color. And you can see some really fun things happening with the blooming. It's not always about using fancy paintbrushes and following the rules. Sometimes it is just about getting inspired by moving things around and watching colors bloom. I'll throw in a little bit more coral over here. This is looking cool. It almost has like a little bit of dimension to it. Hopefully it dries that nice. Okay. So we have an interesting hills with different colors in them and everything else. If it gets to be a bit too much for you, you can even add a bit of blending solution to the bottom, and that will give you a little bit less color. Okay, so the front is just these, it's all very abstract. If I wanted to, I could put a sun on this, and even with the last part of this, I can angle this down and create a bit of smoothness since I have quite a bit of craggy rocks. I'm not liking that over there, so I might add a little bit of mermaid here and then some coral. It's just, I'm just doing what I feel, and there's no right or wrong way. Some people might feel something totally different than what I'm doing. Okay. Yeah, I'm liking that a little bit better. Fun. Okay. A little bit more mermaid along the bottom here. Let it bloom up. We're just creating more and more layers, which is always a good time. You could just sit here and do this forever. But what I'm gonna do to finish up this little basic abstract landscape is to add a sun. And with the sun, with this one, I can do silver because I have silver here, and I'm sure you guys don't want me to go and run around looking for colors while the video's rolling. So what I'm going to do is add the sun. And adding a sun, you just have to make sure of one thing. You want to make sure that you find out the right place for the sun, and you're going to drop it into this painting wherever you think a sun would be. It could have already have set, and then you don't put a sun in. But for this, maybe I'll put it about right there, and I just put 2 drops on top of one another, and I just leave it. Now that's going to be my sun. If I don't let the drops go one on top of the other, they're not going to make a perfectly round sun. And this time the sun is silver. I have some silver in my little painting, so it's just a little abstract landscape. And I can even do a little tree in here. So leaving it like this is really cool. But if you wanted a little tree on your hill, we are going to draw on a little tree. So maybe like a olive style tree. So what we do is, the first thing I like to do is I like to have a stick tree going on, which never looks very good. Okay. Okay, that's probably about good for the main bases. I want to get rid of this little bit of junk over here, so I thought a tree might be nice to finish up this picture with, which you don't have to do, okay? So we start with the stickman tree, and then we thicken it up. So we'll just go in here with whatever kind of felt you have. This is actually a Sharpie, but you can use any felt that you happen to have. Sharpies are alcohol inks, so they work really well. You want to make sure that you get your tree all the way down to the bottom there. And then Sharpies, the one thing about them is the quality isn't the same as the Spectrum Noir and the Chameleon. So the way that a tree works, pretty simple, but good for everybody to know. The way a tree works is that the base part of the tree is going to be thicker than the rest. So you start with a stickman tree, but then you thicken up your tree as you go. And make sure when you're working on your tree that you don't start rubbing onto your landscape down below. Okay? So as it's going to the base, it's thicker. Okay? And I'm not doing, I usually rest my hand a little bit more, but I can't because my substrate is still wet with my inks on it. Okay? So we got a little tree here now. Just a lone tree sitting on the hill. So initially this was going to be without any implements, but I have decided that I'm throwing in a tree. So here's my little Sharpie tree. Not bad. Okay. Make sure it's thicker through there. That's the most important thing, is that your central trunk is biggest and then it graduates out. So this tree has no leaves. I want some leaves on my tree. So I'm going to use some of these alcohol ink applicator felts. Some of you have an applicator stamper. I do as well, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to fold it into quarters. And what color would be nice for the tree? I think even darker, some pink on there, and maybe some coral. Same colors that are in the sky. I could even add a little bit of red. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We have to be careful because this tree is so tiny. And we're just gonna take that and put some little leaves on the tree. So just be careful because wherever you have the ink, it's going to create little leaves. Okay, so that tree I think added to it. I could even take my little felt and give a little bit more of a heave-ho in here. If I wanted a true olive tree, they're usually a lot thicker at the base, so I could thicken this tree up quite a bit. Bring it out. This is abstract, and that's the excuse for not the same color or texture as a real olive tree. but the base of an olive tree is really big. So let's just make that a little bigger. That looks a little better. Okay, so now we have our little abstract landscape with a little sun and a little tree. I'll just move that up a little closer so you can see it. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe.